Suffering is a universal experience, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a devastating illness, or witnessing injustice in the world. The question of why a good and omnipotent God permits such pain has been called the problem of evil. For many, this question isn't just theoretical, it's deeply personal. How do we reconcile the existence of a loving God with the suffering we see around us and experience ourselves? Why does an all-powerful God allow suffering? It's a question that has echoed through the centuries, challenging faith and provoking profound discussions. Today we are delving into this age-old mystery to find answers that resonate with both the mind and the heart. Welcome to our video where we tackle some of the toughest questions of faith. Today's topic: why does God allow suffering? Whether you've struggled with this question personally or someone who has, we invite you to journey with us through scripture, theology, and real life stories to find deeper meaning and understanding. Suffering, journey with us through scripture, theology, and real life stories to find deeper meaning and understanding. Suffering is a universal experience, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a devastating illness, or witnessing injustice in the world. The question of why a good and omnipotent God permits such pain has been called the problem of evil. For many, this question isn't just theoretical, it's deeply personal. How do we reconcile the existence of a loving God with the suffering we see around us and experience ourselves? Pain has been called the problem of evil. For many, this question isn't just theoretical, it's deeply personal. How do we reconcile the existence of a loving God with the suffering we see around us and experience ourselves? Today, we'll explore this challenge from multiple angles, acknowledging the complexity of the issue while seeking wisdom from scripture and theological thoughts. To begin, let's turn to the Bible. Scripture doesn't shy away from the reality of suffering. In fact, it confronts it head on. The story of Job offers one of the most profound explorations of suffering. Job loses everything: his health, his wealth, his family, yet he clings to God, even as he questions why. In the New Testament, we see Jesus himself, the Son of God, experiencing unimaginable suffering on the cross. What does this tell us about God's relationship to human pain? Theologians have long debated the reason behind suffering. St. Augustine viewed it as a consequence of free will, where evil entered the world through human choice. And also C.S. Lewis, in his book The Problem of Pain, he argues that suffering can serve as a megaphone to awaken us to deeper spiritual realities. On the other hand, contemporary theologians like N.T. Wright suggest that suffering is a part of God's larger story of redemption, where our pain, though real and painful, is not a final word. Let us also consider the perspectives of those who have lived through profound suffering. People like Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who found meaning amidst unimaginable pain. How do these real-life testimonies shape our understanding of suffering and God's role in it? Here is where we arrive at a key insight. While we may never fully understand the reason behind suffering, one of the most powerful perspectives comes from the idea of redemptive suffering. This view suggests that God doesn't cause suffering, but redeems it. In Romans 8:28, Paul writes, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This doesn't mean suffering is good, but that God can bring good out of even the darkest situations. I want you to consider the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. He was betrayed by his brother. He was sold into slavery and imprisoned unjustly. Yet Joseph's life was marked by immense suffering. Yet in the end, he says to his brother, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." This is the mystery and hope of redemptive suffering, where pain, though real, is transformed into something meaningful through God's grace. In conclusion, we have explored the problem of suffering from multiple perspectives. We have used scriptures, theology, and personal stories. While the answers are not always clear-cut, the hope we find in the promise of God's redemptive power can provide comfort and strength in the midst of suffering. If this exploration of suffering and faith resonated with you, don't